There's an easier way to get color. Get a Game Gear, the full color portable with over 150 games, like the new Echo, Mortal 2, and Sonic Triple Trouble.
Sega! Hey there, Retro Games fans. This is Andy C from Pieces of 8-Bit. So we're now into May, and that means that it is the end of our Sega Game Gear month with series episode. So for those of you who are new to my channel, each month I take an old console or an inspired console and I live with it for a month. So that might mean putting it in the living room. In the case of this month, it's the Game Gear, so I'm going to carry the Game Gear around with me and travel with it, and I will come back at the end of that month and let you know what it's been like to live with that console for the last 4 weeks, what it's been like to have it as a main console, how much I've played on it. I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson of the device itself. I'll talk to you about the games I've been playing, and I'll talk to you also a little bit about how to get into playing on that device yourself, or getting back into that world of that particular console. So as I mentioned before, this month, or for April I should say, has been all about the Game Gear. So recently I did a Master System month with review. This essentially is a portable Master System for all intents and purposes. I'll talk a little bit about the specs and the history in a moment, but this is what I've been living with for the last month. So without any further ado, let's dig straight into a little bit of the background of the Sega Game Gear, and I'll start to talk to you a little bit about the specifications as well, and then we'll get onto the games. So I will see you on the other side. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the history of the Game Gear. So Sega basically saw the success of the Game Boy, which had already been out a year by the time this was released, and they really wanted in on the action for a portable handheld. This came out in Japan in the 6th of October 1990, sorry, I get my dates right, just trying to remember, and then April 1991 in the UK, EU, and the US. They sold 10.6 million units, which might sound like quite a lot, but this was largely considered to be a bit of a commercial failure, especially when you consider that this beast here, the original Game Boy, sold 118.5 million units. So this was just an absolute, footnote in the sales figures when compared to the two. So yeah, it wasn't a particularly commercially successful device. It had a much better marketing campaign here in the UK, in fact, and by the end of 1992, this actually had 40% market share. But that was generally quite unusual compared to anywhere else, where it was typically sort of around the 10 or slightly less than 10%. So yes, quite successful in the UK. I think we really liked it here. I remember the first time I saw this, I think we really took this to our hearts. The first time I saw it, I was absolutely amazed, playing full color Sonic on an LCD screen on a portable device. I thought that was absolutely amazing. So it was produced until 1997, till April 1997. Part of the 4th generation of consoles, so it sat in there with with the Genesis, as it happens, which was already out at the time. Despite the fact that both the Game Boy and the Game Gear were both 8-bit devices, and the Game Gear itself is based on the 3rd generation of Master System, in fact. Retailed for about £99 here in the UK. It's about $150 in the US, so about £250 if you were buying it accounting for inflation nowadays. So not too bad when you consider how much things like the Vita were, and the PSP I think was around the £200 mark when that came out, and that was back in 2005. Biggest game selling item on there was of course Sonic. That doesn't require much imagination to expect that to be the case. They sold around 400,000 units. Came with a pack-in of columns initially as well, which was sort of Sega's answer to Tetris. A bad little game actually, but yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later when I come to the game. So that's really sort of a kind of whistle-stop tour of the history. So in production for about 7 years, not really that commercially successful, but a device those people that did have it did really love it. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the actual device specification, and yeah, I'll give you sort of an indication of just how powerful this unit was. at the end of that last suggestion there, I suggested that maybe this was going to come with some remarkable specification. That was the implication, but that is actually not the case. It is basically a Sega Master System inside here. It's running the same Zilog Z80 processor that you'll find in a Master System. It's got 8K of RAM, it's got 16K of VRAM. So it's very, very similar specification, and that is on purpose. That means that you've got a back catalogue of Sega Master System games that you could easily sideways port and play them on the Game Gear. And in fact, the Game Gear did have an adapter, so you could actually put the Master System cartridges into it. I mentioned before that the Sega Genesis was already out at this point, and that wasn't really a problem at the time. And when we had the Super Nintendo as well out at the same time as the Game Boy, people were quite happy to take a bit of a step back in terms of processing ability and capability for a smaller portable device. And this should have been, you know, straightforward for Sega to produce in terms of getting that what was now quite old technology from the Master System into the portable device. And you can see, I mean, it is massive. So there's plenty of room in here to do it, yes, it's very, very reminiscent of the Master System. If you played the Master System, the Genesis will be very, very familiar to you. Obviously, the big thing for the for the Game Gear was the fact that it came with this color screen, and it was a 3.2-inch color screen capable of displaying 32 colors at any one time. But it actually had a color palette of over 4,000 colors. Displaying at 160 by 144 pixels. When you compare that to the Game Boy, which was monochrome, on paper you'd be thinking, well, actually, surely that's got to be a better bet. It's got a bigger screen, and it's got a, you know, it's backlit and it's full color. You know, what's not to love? But of course, this is where the real problem was for the Genesis. So the Genesis, what am I talking about? For the Game Gear, so many consoles in my head, I do apologise, so many consoles in my head. The Game Gear took 6 batteries, 6 AA batteries, which were not particularly cheap at the time. Battery technology wasn't as good as it is now either. And so even if you had rechargeables, the rechargeables lasted even less time, and you'd have to constantly be charging them, and you'd have to constantly be carrying loads of batteries around with you to play it. You get 3 to 5 hours was the stated time. I've often seen no more than 2. So 6 batteries, 2 or 3 hours of gameplay, and then you were done, and then you'd need 6 more batteries. Now its rival took 4 batteries, and this device could last anywhere up to 30 hours. So you've got 10 times more gameplay, but only 4 batteries compared to 6. So in many ways, I think that was a huge problem for the Game Gear. I think that was one of its biggest issues. It did have a little power adapter on it, so you could plug it into a power adapter, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, because there are some tips if you want to get back into this later on. So stick with me, and I'll talk a little bit about power adapting for 2025. But yes, that was a big issue. And the other issue I think is fairly obvious to see, which is that if you take the Game Gear and you take the Game Boy, the two devices are really quite a lot different in size. So you've got the Game Boy, which is quite portable. It's quite put in your pocket. You can carry it around nice and easily. It's not too heavy. Versus this, which is absolutely enormous. So yeah, quite a big difference in size. You know, they're probably about the same width, but yeah, just that sort of extra kind of 25-30% in size bulk of the Game Gear meant that it was just that little bit harder to carry around as well. So yes, it came with some cool little extra features though. It did come with an analog TV tuner, which a lot of people had, which meant that you could use it as a portable television on the move. If you buy one now, it's merely for collection only, because it won't work. There's no analog signals around anymore, so not much use. But that was quite a neat little thing. Yeah, those are sort of the specs. I think that's probably all of the specs that I've mentioned there, essentially for the Sega Game Gear. So let's get on and talk about some of the games I've been playing this month, and that really, as I always say, makes or breaks any console, I think. So as I always say, and as I've just said, the games make the console, and if you don't have the right sort of games for the console, then generally speaking, it's not going to be it's not going to succeed. Now this is a weird one, because the Sega Game Gear didn't succeed, and yet it had the back catalogue. You could play pretty much any Master System game you wanted on it, and most of the games that you got on the Sega Game Gear were Master System ports as well. So coming from a very popular console with some amazing games on it, it's kind of surprising to me really that the Master System didn't do better, and I can only assume really that has to do with the hardware and also just the sheer dominance of the Nintendo Game Boy. It was a cultural phenomenon at the time, and I think Sega struggled to catch up with that, despite the fact that certainly here in the UK it was considered the cooler console, you know, whereas Nintendo was still thought of a little bit as being for kids and they were considered toys. Sega did really try and kind of look to the more grown-up market to sell their consoles, and I think they succeeded to some degree, but it wasn't really until the mid-90s when we saw the PlayStation when Sony really understood how to tap into that older market. So I think the Game Gear failed on a few accounts. Games-wise, games are fantastic because they're Sega games and they're Master System games. It did suffer a little bit, again down to the dominance of Nintendo, from not having as many third-party titles, and there wasn't as much third-party support, and I think that definitely didn't help either. But let's talk a little bit about some of the games I've been playing. I've been playing quite a few actually, and obviously I've been playing Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. You know, any Sega console, you're gonna have to be playing Sonic games on it. I did a review of the Sonic games on the Master System a while ago. They're exactly the same games. They're great fun to play. The only issue I found with certainly playing, was it the first one or the second one? I think it might have been on the second one. The screen just made it a little bit tricky. I was actually struggling to get past the first level on this one, the first sort of stage. Whereas on the Master System I had no trouble with it. I don't know whether it's the controller setup or whether it's the screen or what, I don't know. I was struggling with it a little bit, but loved the Sonic games. Absolutely brilliant games, as you know. Very different on the Master System and therefore on the Game Gear as they were to their 16-bit versions, which came out sort of around about the same time. Very different. These ones much more focused on exploration, whereas the 16-bit versions on the Genesis were much more about sort of speed and all the kind of things that we kind of think of when we think of Sonic nowadays. But I do love the Master System versions of Sonic, and I do therefore love the versions of Sonic on the Game Gear. Now, one of the other games, this is probably the game I've played the most, is a game that I absolutely love from distributed by US Gold, James Pond 2 Robocod. This is just a really fun little game. It's really hard to explain if you've never played this before. I played this loads on the Amiga back in the day, and there are versions on practically every platform from that era. Yeah, you're just sort of a little fish thing, and you kind of go around these levels, and you've got the ability to sort of extend and hold on to things and shuffle along, and it's just sort of it's a very hard game to try and explain without showing you. Obviously, you'll be just seeing the clip while I'm talking here of what it's about. But it's actually a really good game to revisit, and you don't need to go and revisit it on the Game Gear. You can go and play this on any platform from this sort of area. You'll find it all over the place. And like I said, I played it on the Amiga back in the day. Probably the best outing of the James Pond games, in my opinion, but a really good fun game to play nonetheless. I picked up another random game I'd not heard of before, but was apparently very popular in Japan. This is called Fantasy Zone, and it's sort of a bit of a kind of R-type style, sideways scrolling ship game. It's quite hard actually. Yeah, you sort of move along and there's little sort of things that you've got to shoot. Very similar sort of idea to R-Type, if you've seen it. Quite nice style, very colourful game, very Japanese. I really like this game. It's quite fun, but like I say, it's quite frustrating. But I did persist with it. I played it a few times, got a little bit further each time. That's quite fun to play. I also played, I mean, there's loads of games, like I mentioned, I played loads of games. I've got Super Monaco GP, I've got Putt and Pitch. There's a golf game, I can't forget the name of it. And I've got Mortal Kombat, which I also played. So most of the games that I've got for the Game Gear, I've probably not got loads, I've probably got maybe 20, 30 games. I sort of played, I played most of them throughout this month, and that's the beauty of handheld consoles, of course, is that you can just pick it up, you can sit in bed and play. It's all kind of quite quite easy to get on with. You don't have to kind of distract everybody from the television and everything else. So I've played quite a lot of games, but the ones that I've mentioned so far, so the Sonic 1 and 2, RoboCod, Fantasy Zone, and Columns, which is my last entry here, probably the games that I've played the most. So Columns was a pack-in with the Game Gear, much like Tetris was with the Game Boy. It's a sort of Tetris falling blocks type puzzle game. It is a little bit different to Tetris. Basically, you get little coloured, these little blocks that come down with 3 colours in, and you can sort of move. They stay vertical, and you've got to move the colours around and then try and get lines of 3 to match up. It's quite challenging. It gets really hard really, really quickly. So even if you start off on a very easy level and everything's quite slow, whereas Tetris takes a little bit longer to get going, Columns gets really hard really, really quickly. I feel like at some point I want to do a comparison of some of the column games, because I did love Lumines on the PSP and on the Vita, which were their sort of block games, and probably I like that controversially more than any of the others. Less people have heard of it. I got really addicted to Lumines. So that and Puyo Puyo, there's quite a few good ones out there that are probably worth another look. But that's another story for another day anyway, I digress. So those are the games that I've been playing. I've enjoyed all of them. I think the biggest problem with the Game Gear, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, is although it is a colour screen, it isn't without its problems, and I'll discuss what it's been like to live with and how you can get back into that in a moment. But games wise, I mean, they're all very, very familiar games, right? I mean, there were 300 games that were released for the Game Gear, so there's a reasonable catalogue, not a massive catalogue. But you know, if you were a collector and you wanted to pick an obscure console to go and collect all the games for, Game Gear might be a good place to start if you're a Sega fan, because 300 games feels like it's a little bit more achievable than perhaps a full-blown PS2 collection. But yeah, the games are good, and of course, as I mentioned before, you know, you can play your Master System games on there as well with the adapter. So not something I've tried, not something I own. If I see one at a gaming fair, maybe I'll pick one up. But yeah, games wise, pretty enjoyable. Yeah, good fun. Have I enjoyed them as much as playing some of the games on this bad boy? Honestly, hand on heart, I want to say I prefer the Game Gear, because I always had a real soft spot for the Game Gear. But to be honest with you, when it comes to sheer hours that I've put into games, I've probably played more on this. I don't know, there's something about it. Super Mario Land, which is one of my favourite Game Boy games, and Tetris, of course, which is just everybody likes Tetris. You can just kind of come back and play and just, you know, I don't know. This feels like it has a little bit more appealing gameplay. I don't know. It's weird. I feel like it shouldn't, but it just does. So there we go. Great fun playing those games. Let's talk a little bit about what it's actually been like to live with the Game Gear for the last 4 weeks. Okay, so I'm gonna, to be honest with you, I probably won't ever pack the Game Gear away. Same with all the portables. They do tend to get a bit more of an outing than my ordinary consoles. I don't have the ability to have all my consoles hooked up all the time, so I don't tend to play them that often. That's part of the reason why I do the monthly series, so that they don't just sit on a shelf going idle forever. So you know, that's you know, one of the reasons why I do it. Obviously, for the portables, they sit on my shelf behind me here, and I can just pick up one. If I fancy playing something, I can just pick up a portable at any time. And I have done that quite a lot with the Game Gear and the Game Boy, and my PSP and my Vita and things like that as well. You know, I do tend to grab those and play on them from time to time, just because they're there. It's great, and I still prefer a handheld console to playing games on my phone. Call me old-fashioned, I don't care. But I do genuinely prefer it. I think it's probably the controllers, those kind of things. When I've had, I had this thing called a backbone for my phone before I changed my phone, and you could play games on that with the controller. But even then, I don't know, just something about it. I don't know, something that's been designed specifically for gaming just seems to have better appeal. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So what has it been like? Yeah, it's been good. I mean, I've enjoyed it. I've carried it in my bag to work, and when I've had a bit of time at lunchtime, I've had a bit of a play. And the reason why I did it this month was because I was travelling. So I've been out on my holidays to Turkey for a week, so I took it with me to Turkey, which meant that I had it on the plane, and I had it sitting on my sunbed as well. Yeah, it's been good, but I think when it comes to using it as a truly portable console in the way that it was designed, I think there are better alternatives now. I had a number of problems with it. One is that it is just so bulky. When you consider it against something like the PSP, have I got it to hand? Yes, I do. When you consider it to something modern like the PSP, so I mean, obviously, it's a slightly unfair comparison because we're talking about 15 years between these two. But, it's a much smaller device. You've got a much bigger screen. It's light. It's very portable. Sony really outdid themselves with the PSP. Now, obviously, this is a much older device. You can't compare these two things directly. But I think if you're wanting to take a portable device with you, there are alternatives, and I will talk to you about that in the next section. But so it was very bulky. And it was difficult to, I couldn't find a case for it, was the other thing. I ordered a case and it wasn't the right thing. So there is always that fear of it getting damaged. If you can find yourself a case, that's obviously quite hard to find now, because of the age of the console, because it wasn't so popular. So that was tricky. The cartridges, I mean, you're going to have the same problem with the Game Boy transporting the cartridges. They're about the same sort of size. You can get little plastic cases for them, so that was okay. They were all just sort of floating around in the bottom of my carry-on bag. And that was okay. But obviously the two biggest issues with this, really, by modern standards, one is the power, the battery power. Now, I have got a USB adapter for this, so that is something that definitely helps. And I've got a little power pack that's for charging phones and things when you're traveling, which I take with me, which is quite heavy, but that was quite a good sort of way of keeping this powered. So I've got the 6 batteries in here. Batteries are a little cheaper nowadays. They're a little bit better. They do last a little bit longer, but not really significantly so. So that was the first issue, was just keeping the thing powered. And the second issue is the screen. So it has got a lovely screen for its age, 3.2 inch LCD screen, full color and everything else like that, which is great. But it is absolutely rubbish in light, in any kind of significant amount of light. And the other problem with it is that it's got a very, very shallow viewing angle. So early LCDs, you have to hold them at a certain angle to be able to actually see what's on the screen. In bright lights, the Nintendo itself, even though it's monochrome, still suffers with that problem. It is still an issue playing, so I tried to sort of, I knew it wasn't going to work really, but I thought I'd give it a go anyway. I sat in some shade on a sunbed and tried to play on it, and you just couldn't. It didn't matter how much shade you put on it or whatever, you just couldn't play it. It was just impossible. So the only time you could ever really play it when you're out outside is really if it's quite dark, nighttime, or just go inside. There just isn't any kind of use for it. But you know what I did? I did play it from time to time. For a bit of downtime in an evening, I might have just sort of played for half an hour or an hour, or just sitting in bed, played for half an hour or an hour. It just sort of entertained me. But I think as a truly portable device for which it was originally intended, I think there are many, many better alternatives now. And if you want to play those old Game Gear games, there are also better alternatives. So I think I have enjoyed having it out for a month. I've enjoyed playing the games on it. I think as something that I think if you seriously want a retro device but as a portable device that you take with you, I would strongly suggest doing something different, unless you really want a Game Gear. The other problem with them as well is that that they are not, finding a good working Game Gear nowadays is actually quite difficult. And so that's the other thing as well. They do have a few reliability issues, especially with the screens. So definitely think twice if you're thinking about picking one up. I love the fact that I own a Game Gear. I love having a Game Gear. I know portables aren't for everybody, but I do really love the device. But I think if you're serious about having a portable device, I would probably give the Game Gear a wiper. So yes, long and short of it, I've really enjoyed it, but probably look for something else. So let's just talk a little bit now about how you can get yourself back into the world, all that just being said, back into the world of Sega Game Gear if that is something that you really, really want to do. Okay, so you've ignored my previous section. And you've decided that actually, you know what, I really do want to get back into the world of Game Gear gaming. So what are my options? Well, there are always the obligatory options of playing on emulators. Now, obviously with a handheld device, playing on an emulator on a full-blown television or a big screen, or whatever, my first question to you would be, why do you want to do that? Ultimately, you're playing games that are designed for portable devices, and remember that this is a Master System clone. So you can go and play Master System games on a big screen if you want to do that. You don't really need to go and get the Game Gear emulator unless you really, really want to. But there are Game Gear emulators out there. Now, there is a time when you might want a Game Gear emulator, and that is if you happen to have something like this. So this is a GPI case, Retroflag GPI case. This is an older generation one. There are newer ones of these. Basically, this contains a Raspberry Pi. It's a Raspberry Pi Zero, and it's essentially a very small, very, very cheap device that you can pop in here. It actually lives in the cartridge. You get a full color screen on here, and it will allow you to put things like the RetroPie build on it, and that allows you to play anything that you want. And you can obviously play the original Master System games themselves. You can have the Game Gear games on here. It will play, but it's pretty good at 8-bit. It's not the most powerful machine in the world. It's pretty good at playing 8-bit stuff, which is perfect for if you want to be playing Game Gear games or Game Boy games on the go. So a little device like this. The actual case itself is more expensive than the computer that goes in the back of it. I think they retail for, I think at the moment, maybe 60 or 70 pounds, but don't quote me on that. And then so for probably less than £100, you can have yourself a device with emulators on it, and you can play all the games that you want. And this one only has 3 batteries in the back, and it comes with a little USB power adapter thing as well that goes in the top of that. So that is that for me, I would say if you want to be playing Game Gear games, if that's what you're specifically looking for, I think going for something like this is going to be a much better bet. Little portable emulator based device is the way to go. You could also look at things like the Evercade, although they don't really have things like the like a lot of the Sega stuff on there. They don't really have Sega and things like that. But if you want a portable device with retro games on it, the Evercade is good. That's not really going to scratch the itch for Sega Game Gear, however. So those are your options there. On the some of the other things that you can also do. So the Nintendo Switch, if you've got the online Nintendo subscription, there are a lot of Sega games on there, not necessarily Game Gear games, but there's Master System games. Are there Master System games? No, I think it's just Genesis games, but they're obviously, if you've got that Sega itch, you want to play Sonic, you can play that on the Switch. Obviously that's very portable as well. And if none of those options are really floating your boat and you really do want to go and get yourself a Game Gear, my 2 pieces of advice for you would be, 1, make sure that you buy from somewhere where you're going to get some kind of warranty, or you've got some comeback if it doesn't work. So somewhere like CEX, where you're going to get that 5-year warranty, that's a really good bet. You will pay more for it, but it's absolutely worth it for that extra warranty. Or if you've got a good independent supplier, and that would always be my preferred go-to, a good independent supplier that you trust. So for me, like Retrospective over in Tewkesbury, I would buy from them. I did actually not do that. I bought this particular device from eBay, but it was a reputable seller. They showed some pictures of it working. It came bundled with a load of games. I was really, really happy with it. But make sure that you are happy with the shots of the screen working, or if you go into a shop, make sure you can see the screen working, because that is something that can be problematic. There is one other alternative if you want to buy an original Game Gear, which I am quite tempted to do at some point, and if I decide I want to kind of get into the world of Neo Geo, this might also be the thing that I do. There are some retailers out there. I showed you at the Oxford Gaming Market, one of the guys there, he basically refurbishes these machines. They are absolutely beautiful, and they've got full colour modern LCD screen replacements in them, so they will work in that low light. So it solves that low light problem. You're going to have the reliability of having a modern screen in there as well. I don't know what it does for battery life, so that's the bit I'm not so sure of. Yeah, I mean, he sells, this particular guy sells all sorts of console, Game Boy Colors with fully replaced screens, those kind of things as well. But yeah, he had a few Game Gears in there, which looked amazing with those bright, vibrant screens on. So that is another way to do it. Go and get a sort of refurbished system with a lot of the problems that then will hopefully have gone away, and you'll have a bit of a warranty as well with that. So lots of different ways of getting back into it. But I think really, if it's just the games you're interested in, I think going for something like the GPI case with a Raspberry Pi Zero in it or something similar, I think is the way to go. That would be my recommendation. But just be careful looking for Game Gear. Just be careful, because they are hard to find good working ones. And let's face it, if you want a portable device, I mentioned it before. For me, this is the ultimate portable gaming device. I absolutely adore the PSP. I think it's my favourite portable device. I might do a review of this year, because this is getting on for 20 years old. So I think if you want a portable device, you want something a bit retro, go for something like this. You can quite often pick up things like Sega collection discs and things for devices like this, so you can go and play some of those older games on here as well. So unless you really want a Game Gear, I would generally look at alternatives. So there we go. That is my month with. So I'm just going to kind of have a bit of a wrap up now and tell you what's coming up in the channel, what's been going on, and I'll see you on the other side. So there you go. I hope you found that useful. That was my month with Game Gear, and a very mixed experience, I think, in summary. I think, I've really enjoyed it. I love the Game Gear. I still love the Game Gear, right? Don't get me wrong. It's not something that I've kind of gone, oh, that was a bit disappointing. I kind of knew how it was going to play out based on what I understood of the device and owning the device and what that's like. But I have some very fond memories of the Game Gear. I think probably if you were coming to it for the very first time and you were thinking about it and you'd never played on the Game Gear before, I would probably just leave it alone. I think go for the emulator, as I mentioned before. If you have that nostalgia for it, it's great. But I definitely understand why Nintendo won out, despite the fact that I think, from a purely specification point of view, the Game Gear was the better bet and it was the cooler device by miles. But let's face it, it was never going to beat the Game Boy, not with that woeful battery life. That is the Sega Game Gear. Right, so first of all, let's do a bit of a now and next then. So obviously the moment that maybe some of you, or possibly one or two of you, have been waiting for is what's coming up next month in my Month With series. Now, I mentioned that it might not be a console. Now, I am quite nervous about doing this one because it is one of those things where I don't know exactly how much I'm going to play on it and what games I'm going to play yet, but that device is actually this monster here. So for those of you who are not in the UK, you're not probably going to know what this is. This is a BBC-B, and this was actually donated to me by a very good friend of mine. His dad was having a clear out and he had some BBC-B stuff knocking about in his loft. And he said, would you want it? And I was like, absolutely, yes. I think I did a video a little while ago where I was looking to sort of do a bit of a kind of housekeeping episode with it. Essentially, where I did a bit of housekeeping, so I kind of cleaned it out. I've got another one out in the garage. I had a couple of motherboards as well. And various devices. So I did a bit of a clean out of this one. I had the power supply. I did initially buy a USB power supply, but I actually had the power supplies fully refurbished and recapped. I had those back. A really good guy. If anybody's interested, drop me a link. Drop me a note in the comments. I'll let you know if any of you got a BBC that needs a new power supply. I know just the guy. So I had that back, and I replaced all the screw fittings and the feet and everything else on it, so it's good to go. And I've also got a special expansion in it which allows you to, it's a bit like the device you can get for things like the Amiga, but it's a little memory card that slots in underneath in the expansion slots and allows me to put all the games on there. I've got hundreds of floppy disks knocking around, but and I've got a floppy disk drive as well, but I thought this might just be a little bit easier for doing the reviews, and you can get pretty much anything that was on the back catalogue for BBC on there as well. So I'm going to be living this for a month. The problem with it is it's absolutely massive, and I'm not sure where I'm going to put it. I might have to I might have to I've got an Xbox One sitting in here, so I might have to actually pop the Xbox on top of there and lift my TV up a little bit, which is going to look horrendous for a month, but we'll see how that goes. So yes, yeah, we'll see how that's going to be. It's going to be interesting living with this. I don't know whether I'm going to try and do anything else other than just play games on it. Whether I'm going to do any kind of other things, we'll see as we go through. All right, so that's coming up. Also, other things that are going on at the moment. So next week, I'm going down to London. So it will be another road trip, and much like London buses, seems appropriate. I hadn't done a road trip. Road trip 3 was back in October last year. I did road trip 4 a few weeks ago, and now road trip 5 is coming up. And we're going to be going down to the Science Museum. I'm going with my oldest son Ollie. And they have a permanent exhibit on there called Power Up, which is a paid-for exhibit, which is all about retro gaming. So we're going to go down and have a look at that. And we're going to see if we can try and find a nice retro gaming arcade. I think there's one over in Battersea that I quite fancy trying out. So if we get time, we're going to try and go over there as well. And obviously anything that I do, I will let you know about. So that's going to be coming up. So I've got that going on. Other things that are kind of going on at the moment. Got a really interesting book on the go actually, which some of you might be interested in. It's called, and I keep forgetting the name of it. It's that good, I keep forgetting the name of it. It's called Game Over Memory Wars by M.J. Sullivan, and it's about sort of a near future, kind of a bit like the sort of Ready Player One style games. But it's for those of you who are watching this who are into your retro games, as I'm sure most of you are. It's great. There's loads of little pop references to old games and characters from old games and things in there as well. It's essentially a VR thing. One of the guys in there, they sort of get hijacked and he gets some of his memories stolen. And the idea they then have to go and play games. This group of kids basically go and play games in VR to try and essentially win back his memory. So I'm on my way through that book at the moment, but as I was reading it, I realised just how many pop references there were in there, and I thought I've got to mention this on my channel, because for those of you who are avid readers, what I've read so far has been quite enjoyable. So that's Game Over Memory Wars. Go check it out. I'm reading it on Kindle at the moment, but I'm sure there's you can probably just go and buy the book if you prefer it in the old-fashioned style. So that's going on. Racing Challenge as always. I say that every week. I have now got the disc. So I think I mentioned it last week. Got Road Rash. That's going to be happening soon as well. And yeah, I think that's probably all that's going on at the moment. So yeah, probably I'll just leave it there for the day. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you do enjoy these videos, please do hit that like and subscribe button. Yeah, do really appreciate your support. It's been really great. Go back and check out my video from last week as well, my 10 most played games, which was a VR to 8-Bit Boy UK. That is really the 10 most, not my 10 favourite games, but the 10 games that I've probably invested the most time in. It's been really interesting seeing some of the video responses to that. Some really interesting, very different games from a lot of the YouTubers out there. Obviously, because quite often we'll invest time in a game that is quite obscure. That in some cases nobody's ever heard of before. So it's a good way of going and sort of finding out. There are some big hitters in mine, but there are also a couple of obscure ones as well. So go check my video out and go and check out the videos of some of the others as well. There's links in my description for some of the other responses as well. So yes, that's it then for the today. For today. Please do take care of yourselves. I'll see you around. Bye for now.